I'm going to live with my parents from today. If you don't like it, divorce me and leave." Steve stood boldly, smirking at me. "Then you're fired. Leave the company." I confronted Steve with my true feelings. Sighing softly, I gave Steve a cold stare. Seeing my eyes, Steve tensed up suddenly. Anxiety spread across Steve's face. "I am Jenny Hill, 44 years old. I run a company that manufactures vehicles and parts. The company was founded by my grandfather, making me the third generation. It's a family-run business. Initially, I intended to lead an ordinary life and had no intention of taking over the company. I wasn't very good at academics during my student days. I planned to find a job at a regular company after graduating. And I actually got a job at an IT company. However, when I was 26, my parents died in an unexpected accident. I have an older brother who loves research and is always in his graduate school lab. My father left a will stating that I should be the next president of the company. After that, it felt like I was on a roller coaster. I quit my current job and joined my father's company. The vice president acted as president, and I worked hard to learn the job. I worked tirelessly, studying the products we made and the management of the company. At first, people treated me delicately, as if I were a fragile lady, but gradually they opened up to me. Little by little, I found the work interesting, and I became the president at the age of 40. I have lived my life devoted to my work. While the people around me got married one after another, I didn't have a single boyfriend. I prioritized work over leisure time. I traveled domestically and internationally for the company, hardly remembering holidays like Easter or Christmas. Relatives began to nag me about finding a successor. Every time I saw relatives at family gatherings, they would insensitively remind me that I wouldn't be able to have children if I waited too long. "Aren't you lonely?" some would ask. I knew arguing would only bring more nagging, so I would just smile bitterly and leave quickly. Thanks to my dedication, the company's performance steadily improved. Incorporating IT was a significant factor. I started to have some leisure time and began to enjoy my free time. That's when I met my husband, Steve, at a bowling alley. A client recommended it, and I got hooked because it suited my personality. I even bought my own ball and shoes and started participating in tournaments. Steve was someone I often saw at the bowling alley. He was fun to talk to, taught me things I didn't know, and we even entered tournaments as a pair. After several dinners together, he confessed his feelings, and we started dating. Steve is the same age as me but looks youthful enough to be mistaken for someone in his 20s. I'm often mistaken for his sister. People must think I'm unreliable. Every time, Steve would look embarrassed. Steve has many hobbies. He likes not only watching sports like baseball, soccer, and golf but also playing them. Influenced by him, I started playing golf. He also introduced me to concerts and musicals, showing me a world I had never known. Time spent with Steve was very stimulating and fun for me. Having my first boyfriend at 44. It wouldn't be strange if I felt giddy. Amidst these fluffy days, Steve suddenly made an unexpected proposal. "Won't you meet my parents?" I was at a loss for words at his sudden request. "If I'm going to marry, it would be with you. I want to introduce you to my parents." It had been about 2 months since we started dating seriously. Though it seemed a bit soon, I was of age and not without my anxieties. Though hesitant, I was also pleased. I had no intention of refusing. A week later, we visited Steve's family home. The house was neatly arranged, with a faint pleasant scent. Steve's father and mother welcomed us in the living room. His mother had an elegant air, with her hair dyed a beautiful shade of purple. "Such a lovely lady, my son is a lucky man." They welcomed me with beaming smiles. You are truly a wonderful young lady. I felt a bit awkward being praised so much. Throughout the visit, Steve's parents continued to lavish praise on me, making me blush. Steve looked proud beside me. See? Finding someone like her at 44 is a real catch. Steve was smiling, but I felt uneasy about his choice of words. A sense of unease began to spread in my heart. However, Steve and his parents seemed happy and laughed together. I thought I could get along well with such wonderful parents after marriage. The earlier unease vanished from my heart. However, I noticed that Steve called his parents Mama and Papa. I used to call my parents Mama and Papa, too. But I wondered if it's common for adult men to do so. It seems rare. Am I just unaware of societal norms? Having lost my parents early and focused solely on work, I might be lacking in social common sense. I wondered if my feeling of discomfort was out of the ordinary and tried not to dwell on it. Steve must have a close relationship with his parents. He often praises his mother, which is good. However, during a conversation about cooking, Steve said something that felt off to me. Mama's meat and potato stew is the best in the world. Furthermore, Steve lightly disparaged the meat and potato stew I made. Jenny's meat and potato stew is somewhat lacking compared to Mama's. I couldn't manage to smile upon hearing these words. That's right, you should get the recipe from her. Steve's manner of speaking was different than usual. Why is he acting so superior? He didn't notice my ambiguous expression and exchanged smiles with his mother. Steve's mother took out a notebook and began writing down the recipe for the meat and potato stew. With this, you can make something similar to Mama's meat and potato stew. I wasn't sure whether I should be happy. Before I knew it, my expression had turned into the ambiguous smile I showed to relatives. It was getting dark outside, and just when it was about time to leave, the conversation turned to marriage. I want to do it right away. It would make life easier. And being a part-timer, the income is tough. I was stunned by this shocking statement. What? A part-timer? My eyes were wide open. Steve was supposed to be working in sales. I hadn't told Steve about my job either. I had only mentioned that I work at a company that makes parts. I found it difficult to say that I was the president, but I had no idea Steve was a part-timer. Steve snapped back as I stood there dumbfounded. You must be thinking, even at 44, but there's a deep reason for this. Apparently, Steve's mother had always been frail and often ill. Furthermore, 2 years ago, his father became seriously ill and required level 1 care. Steve was working in sales at a printing company at the time but quit to take care of his father. He then became a part-timer to have flexible hours for caregiving. It would be tough on Mama alone. I wanted to be of help to my parents in any way. Steve was teary-eyed as he spoke. I listened solemnly. For that reason, I thought it might be okay to continue as a part-timer. Glancing at his parents, Steve nodded. Dad's been in good shape lately, so I've been thinking about getting a job again. Especially now that I'm marrying Jenny. I have to do my best. Steve said this with a sniffle, almost whispering. I felt ashamed for being disappointed upon hearing he was a part-timer. Steve had simply prioritized his parents over his job. What a kind and warm person he is. All the anxiety and unease I had felt until now had completely disappeared. A few days later, I made a proposal to Steve. Why don't you try taking the mid-career exam at my company? Steve seemed surprised by my sudden proposal. If you're okay with it, that is. I made sure not to pressure him. Steve seemed hesitant about working at the same company as me. Our sales department is short-staffed. It would really help if Steve could join. I chose my words carefully so as not to hurt Steve's pride. It's a completely different department from mine. However, Steve's concern was elsewhere. If I'm going to work, I want to earn. I want to make Mama feel secure. Money was his priority. Did he think I wasn't earning enough? Then, I took out my tablet and showed Steve the company's job site. I told him about the average salary, holidays, paid leave, and benefits. This might not be too bad. Steve, looking intently at the tablet, seemed to be warming up to the idea. As the company was looking to significantly increase its sales force, Steve was successfully hired. I had informed my secretary about Steve's application as soon as it was submitted. I might ask the secretary to handle any potential issues that arise. I also had another request for the secretary regarding the website. Steve and I decided to register our marriage as soon as he got the job. We didn't have a ceremony. I didn't want my relatives to know. And I wanted to keep my position as president a secret from Steve. I expected opposition from my in-laws, but was surprisingly met with support. My mother-in-law was only concerned about how often we could visit their house. We had a meal at a restaurant instead of a ceremony and postponed our honeymoon. My work was busy, but Steve also didn't seem keen on a honeymoon. I can't be away from Mama and Papa. Again, Mama and Papa. I couldn't shake off my feeling of discomfort regarding our new home. Although a real estate agent introduced us to a new detached house, we decided against it. Considering Steve was a part-timer, it seemed best to avoid unnecessary expenses. After some thought, we made my apartment our new home. Steve agreed. It was probably because it was close to his parents' house. After moving in and starting to live together, Steve's attitude changed. He began to look down on me. "Where's your department?" Steve didn't think of me as a business owner. I didn't intend to lie to keep it a secret, but I preferred it not to be widely known. Then, Steve said something unbelievable. "Well, whatever. You're going to quit anyway." I was taken aback. Quit? Who's quitting? What does this mean? Am I the one who's quitting, not Steve? What is this uneasy feeling I have? Steve glanced at me and smirked with a smile I had never seen before. It was grotesquely ugly, and I shuddered. Suddenly, I felt a chill. "What? Got a problem?" Steve looked at me with incredible coldness. My heart rate increased. Clutching my chest, I managed to convey that I had no intention of quitting my job. Then, it occurred to me. Maybe Steve wanted children. Are you thinking about when we have kids? Our company has excellent maternity and paternity leave. Steve interrupted me with something unbelievable. Kids are out of the question. Mama and Papa are already a handful. I couldn't understand Steve's words and tilted my head. Then, Steve sighed heavily, as if frustrated. "My parents, I told you. They need care." I stiffened as he raised his voice suddenly. Gathering my courage, I managed to respond. "I heard your father has been doing well lately. That's why you re-entered the workforce, isn't it? Even if they're doing well now, both of them are elderly." Steve became furious. "Aren't you worried at all? For a wife, you..." Steve's yelling echoed throughout the room. I was confused and couldn't understand what he wanted. I tried to calm down and sort out my thoughts. It seemed like Steve was trying to push his parents' care onto me. Moreover, he intended to make me quit my job to focus on caregiving. Steve smiled smugly as if satisfied after yelling. "Well, I'm not saying you should quit right away. It's better to have dual income for the money. It seems my income is now the priority. From now on, we'll go back to my parents' house on our days off. Every week." I intended to help as much as I could, but being pushed to provide care every week was unexpected. What shocked me most was Steve's attitude. Before our marriage, Steve was a fun-loving person with many hobbies, always positive and reliable. I was speechless at how much he had changed. A real estate agent had just informed us about a new detached house near Steve's parents' home. Despite the high demand, I had signed the contract, hoping it would change Steve's behavior. I had become entirely reluctant to visit Steve's parents. Yet, they welcomed me warmly. Glad you could come. We've got some cookies as a gift. Let's eat them together. He smiled warmly. Sorry for taking your precious day off for this. She was very considerate towards me. No, it's okay. Having Jenny here makes me feel as if my daughter has come to visit. I'm so happy. Tears of joy welled up in her eyes, and I felt moved. I decided to proceed with the new house. With such wonderful in-laws, everything would be fine. Every time I visited, Steve's mother prepared my favorite sweets. Her thoughtfulness always touched my heart. While I disliked being at Steve's beck and call, seeing his mother happy warmed my heart. After a while, Steve and I began visiting his parents separately due to my work schedule. It was impossible to visit every weekend due to occasional business trips on weekends. To make up for it, I started visiting on weekdays. One weekday, I headed to Steve's parents' house. Having visited multiple times, I didn't ring the doorbell. As I entered the living room, I heard a familiar voice. It was Steve. Supposed to be at work, I wondered why he was there as I approached the living room. Hearing a disturbing conversation, I stopped and peeked into the living room. She's not very attentive. And bad at housework. This voice was my mother-in-law. This was the first time I heard her speak so spitefully. Couldn't you find someone better? She sounded like a completely different person. Struck by her malicious words, I felt suffocated and my hands grew cold. Despite all her praises before, I couldn't believe this gentle woman would say such things. Unable to bear listening any further, my legs wouldn't move. Steve's eerie, cajoling voice was audible. Sorry, Mama. But, she's pretty sturdy, should be good for physical work. How could he speak of me like that? My disgust for Steve grew. It's all about training. With the right guidance, she'll be useful. What does he think I am? I am neither Steve's slave nor his servant. For now, she brings in money, so we'll have to make do. Looking forward to the future. Steve and his mother continued their conversation, laughing carelessly. I felt drained. Unable to stand, I leaned against the hallway wall for support. Although Steve's words were shocking, my mother-in-law's words deeply hurt me. What was all her previous kindness for? I reminisced about the times we shared cookies, laughed together. And the meals she taught me to cook. Always smiling, sometimes with tears in their eyes. Was all that an act? If so, holding off on divorce because I was worried about my mother-in-law would be utterly pointless. From what I've overheard in Steve and his mother's conversation, I'm clearly just seen as a caregiver. Moreover, his mother had said something definitive. For now, we'll praise her and flatter her. That way, she looks foolishly happy. I felt dizzy. The harsh words from my mother-in-law towards me didn't stop. To learn from me and manipulate her well. And she apparently bought a new house nearby. Steve spoke with excitement. I wondered how he knew. The real estate agent called our house. I was taken aback. The real estate agent had called our home. It was my mistake for not insisting they contact me on my mobile. That's great. From now on, we can make her work even harder for us. My mother-in-law's snide laughter made me feel nauseous. Having heard this much, I quietly headed to the entrance and left the house. My hand was numb from gripping my phone too tightly. On my way home, I sent Steve and his mother a message saying I suddenly felt unwell. I regretted getting married at all. The word divorce floated in my mind. I'm someone who acts quickly once I've made up my mind. I always choose regretting doing something over regretting not doing it. Society might not look kindly on a quick divorce. But thinking about spending more time with someone I despise, it seemed better to act quickly. I could no longer stand living with Steve. I immediately prepared the divorce papers. I decided to cancel the new house as well. If not handled correctly, I could end up losing my assets through property division or compensation claims. However, I believed I could manage if I used Steve's emotional abuse as leverage. I have a competent legal advisor and a loyal secretary. After making up my mind, I decided to act more cautiously. I continued to pretend to be submissive to Steve, not to confront him directly. According to reports from my secretary, Steve had been causing several problems at work. This was just the tip of the iceberg. Divorcing Steve wouldn't be enough to sever all ties. I wanted to resolve the issues at work quickly and get the divorce over with. And I decided to keep my role as the president a secret. If Steve or his parents found out before the divorce, it could complicate matters. I shared everything with my secretary, embarrassed but needing help. With the secretary's assistance, I steadily prepared for the divorce. Living with Steve was suffocating. I felt barely alive. When I had somewhat of a plan, I unexpectedly ran into Steve at work. Good timing. As soon as he saw me, he approached with a broad smile and pulled me into an empty conference room. "You're hiding something from me, aren't you?" His sinister laughter sent chills through me. "I heard you bought a house. Got the call saying it's ready to move in." I sighed inwardly. So, it was about that. "We're going to live with my parents starting today. If you don't like it, divorce me and leave." I was dumbfounded. It seemed it was time to confront Steve. He stood boldly, smirking at me. Steve probably thought I would admit defeat and comply with his demands. I had complied with his demands for the sake of his parents until now. I thought his parents were kind people who cared about me. But knowing the true nature of his mother, I no longer felt close to my in-laws. "Then you're fired. Leave the company." I smiled slightly at Steve as he yelled, and confronted him with the truth. "Huh?" Steve was taken aback, emitting a strange sound. But he must have thought it was a weird joke. He quickly regained his composure and started to laugh offensively. "Fired? You're not my boss. Have you lost your mind?" I sighed softly and gave Steve a cold stare. Seeing my eyes, Steve tensed up suddenly. Anxiety spread across Steve's face. I took a deep breath and spoke calmly. "The one who's mistaken is you. Not even knowing the face of your own company's president." I showed Steve the company newsletter, featuring an interview with me, the president. Steve stared at the newsletter as if it would bore holes. Then looked back and forth between it and me. "You? No way, you're joking, right?" Steve mumbled, his face turning pale as the color drained from it. "Finally understand?" Steve slumped to the floor as if his strength had left him. "No, you've got it wrong, honey. I didn't know anything." Steve, bowing his head towards me, was trembling. His voice was pitifully shaky. "Lately, I've been called by my name, Jenny, not honey. But now, being called honey feels incredibly uncomfortable." "Didn't know?" "No, you just didn't bother to find out." He could have known any time if he wished. The same newsletter was available in the company's break room and cafeteria. A simple search on a smartphone or PC would bring up my photo immediately. Even if the company's website was taken down, my photos could easily be found online. Simply put, Steve had no interest. He had no passion for his work either. As a result, Steve was relegated to organizing tasks within the company rather than sales. Steve doesn't care about the nature of his work. For him, the only important things at the company are income, time off, and benefits. I must have been just another irrelevant existence to him. Of course, that was never enough for me. This isn't over yet. We haven't finished talking about the divorce. Steve was visibly shaken. Do you even realize what you're saying? He must have never thought I would agree to a divorce. Yes, I can never be the ideal wife you want. So, divorce is the only option. I pulled out the divorce papers from my bag. I've had them with me ever since I decided to get a divorce. Do you understand what you're doing? Steve looked incredulously between the divorce papers and me. I placed them on the table. Hurry up and submit. Steve's face turned pale as he froze. Oh, not divorcing? Are you all talk? As if snapping back to reality, Steve slammed the divorce papers on the table. I watched him took them, then placed a stamp pad on the table. Press your thumbprint, too. Steve's face turned red as he dipped his thumb in the ink and pressed it onto the documents. Now we're strangers. I stated this matter-of-factly. Don't come crying to me later. Talking back to your husband is a failure as a wife. Steve said this with a look of disdain. Good riddance. A woman who chooses her job over mama and papa, better off divorced. Steve continued to complain though he was just a sore loser. Oh, my apologies for that. I replied calmly, unfazed. What are you going to do after the divorce? Think about how lonely mama and papa will be without you. Do you realize how sad they'll be? Lonely? Sad. They were the ones speaking ill of me together. Anger flared within me. I was so furious, I couldn't find the words. I wanted to lash out at Steve right there, but all I could do was clench my teeth and glare at him. Taking advantage of my silence, Steve continued to insult me. Poor thing, Mama said she's hungry, but there's nothing to eat. So what? There are some stores and supermarkets near their house. You should go back to your parents' house. There's still a chance to make things right. Steve arrogantly tried to dictate what I should do. His parents are not so incapacitated that they need constant care. It's all just an excuse. I'm tired of this. We're strangers now. And I have an important meeting to attend today. I managed to speak up. My anger reached its peak, and somehow it made me calm. If they're so important, why don't you take a day off and go yourself? I refuse to be a sacrifice for Steve and his parents. I can't just leave my important work for such people. I've been patient and compliant for too long. Enough is enough. Steve, probably not expecting me to talk back, stepped back. You're talking back to me? Out of your place as a wife. I've said it before, I'm no longer his wife. And Steve has a distorted view of things. He must think a wife is a slave to her husband, meant to silently obey. Moreover, Steve only pushes things that are convenient for him onto me. What do you mean, out of my place? Who do you think you are? I confronted Steve without hesitation. Steve gritted his teeth in frustration. They're your parents. Why don't you take care of them before pushing them onto someone else? If his mother is so important, Steve himself should take a day off and visit her. Steve's job was just organizing the supply room. There are no deadlines or appointments with other companies. He could easily take a day off if he talked to his boss, yet he pushes it onto me. His mother's condition can't be that bad. He just wants to boss me around. Ridiculous. Why should I ask and take time off for my own parents? Despite it being about his own parents, he relies on others to an extreme. Steve's selfish logic seems to go on forever. Listen well. Taking care of mama and papa is your job. I'm fed up with hearing mama and papa. What are you asking of me? I didn't expect a reasonable answer, but I asked Steve anyway. Steve scoffed and replied, "You're supposed to take care of Mama and Papa, all of it." I couldn't believe Steve would say something so absurd. How shameless can he be? We're strangers now. Take a day off and go yourself. I told Steve what was plainly right. Steve choked up, unable to say a word. Steve doesn't have to push the care of his parents onto me, he could just take time off himself. Complaining without doing anything himself is absurd. To you, anyone willing to take care of your parents would have been fine, right? Steve, his mouth agape, shook his head, his face turning pale. That's not true. If I had known you were the president, I wouldn't have let her do the caregiving. Despite previously saying, "Out of your place as a wife," he quickly changed his tune. I knew his real intention was to use me as he pleased. That's why he's trying to flatter me now. However, Steve gives himself away with his next remark. With money, we can hire someone else. That's the crux of it. Steve relies on others. So, in the end, caregiving is someone else's responsibility. Are you planning to do nothing and just enjoy life with Mama? That's not true. Steve replied with a forced smile. But if Steve and his parents had managed to manipulate me better, such a future might have been possible. The thought sends shivers down my spine. What if I hadn't known the true nature of Steve's parents? I might have happily agreed to his proposal. There could have been a possibility that Steve focused on caregiving while I earned the income. Steve squandered that chance himself. For me, it might have been a blessing in disguise. Steve looked up at me with tearful eyes, pleading, "Please, let's start over. We used to get along so well. Let's go to various places again like we used to." I reminisced about all the places Steve took me on dates before we got married. "The places you took me to were indeed fun." Steve's face brightened with a smile, perhaps thinking there was still a chance. And I was a fool to be deceived by that. Marriage turned out to be hell. I glanced at my watch exaggeratedly. Well then, I have to prepare for a meeting. I'll contact you about the termination later. I waved casually at Steve and reached for the door handle. Just before I could open the door, Steve grabbed my left hand. Turning around, I saw Steve glaring at me. "We're not done here. Being told to leave because of termination, and then divorce on top of that, I can't accept that." Steve came at me with teary eyes, lashing out. "And what's this about being the president?" His words trailed off, and eventually, Steve let go of my hand. The divorce was initially his idea. The fact that I couldn't confess about being the president was due to their actions. Steve probably never thought I would accept the divorce. He must have believed that threatening me with divorce would make me comply. And the revelation of me being the president must have been a shock to him. Such behavior is not fitting for an adult. Steve clenched his back teeth, seemingly regretting letting the money slip away. "But that's none of my concern. It just shows how foolish you were." At my words, Steve exploded, his voice cracking as he yelled, "Coward. Is it right for a big company's president to fire an employee just because of a divorce? That's tyranny." Either he had lost his reason or was defiantly standing his ground. Steve is too immature in his thinking. Unable to accept what I said, he's just throwing a tantrum. Exhausted from dealing with Steve, I involuntarily covered my face with my hands. Seeing this, Steve grinned, showing his white teeth. "Hit the nail on the head, didn't I? I'll make it public if I have to. You'll be the one in trouble." I was fed up. Though I thought of staying silent, I pulled out a piece of paper from my bag. I read the names written on it. Human Resources Susan, Sales Abby, Jennifer, and then Accounting's Teresa. After saying this, I looked at Steve. He was sweating on his forehead. there are more names, you know. Steve backed away towards the wall as I mentioned the names. The names I just mentioned are women you've persistently hit on. This issue was reported to me by my secretary. The HR department received complaints, which my secretary informed me about. Only my secretary knew about my marriage to Steve within the company. I couldn't believe it when I heard it from my secretary. That my husband had been approaching multiple female employees. And apparently, he had been quite persistent in his invitations. I was mortified by the details of these interactions. I was just trying to deepen my interactions with fellow employees. Such a pitiful excuse. Does he think he can get away with that? Inviting them to hotels, what kind of interaction was that? Steve was left just mumbling, unable to form words. I had received messages sent to the women's smartphones as evidence. The content was embarrassingly explicit, making even me blush. Steve had no way to escape responsibility. He deserved appropriate punishment. It's the president's job to remove individuals causing trouble for other employees. I told Steve firmly. He slumped, defeated. To press further, I pulled an envelope from my bag. This is from accounting. It's about your expense reports. Seems like there's been some tampering. I handed the envelope filled with receipts to Steve. Reluctantly, Steve took it, avoiding my gaze and falling silent. A mother con who leaves everything to others, a womanizer, and on top of that, stingy. Steve has been a nuisance not just to me but to many others. The fact that he's the worst kind of person is undeniable, yet I was the one who believed in him. I'm disappointed in myself for my lack of judgment. You're terminated. You will be held responsible for your actions. I turned on my heel and opened the door of the conference room. As expected, Steve didn't try to stop me. He just leaned weakly against the wall. Well then. Enjoy your time with your parents at your family home. Steve collapsed on the spot, slumping down and muttering something under his breath. But I left him behind and exited the room. Shortly after, I received a formal report from my secretary. Following the report, we proceeded with Steve's dismissal. We apologized to the affected female employees in the name of the president. Through my secretary, we made sure not to neglect their mental care. We also received regular reports from a private investigator through my secretary about Steve's actions. According to the reports, Steve, now unemployed, returned to live with his in-laws and attempted to work as a part-timer again. However, an unexpected event occurred for Steve. His father-in-law was certified as needing level 2 care, followed by his mother-in-law developing dementia. Steve found himself responsible for caring for both his father and mother-in-law. His mother-in-law occasionally wanders at night, leading to many sleepless nights for Steve. Between work during the day and caregiving afterward, he's overwhelmed. I need help. Please provide financial support. Steve contacted me several times. If the divorce had been amicable, I might have considered helping. However, Steve and his parents treated me like a slave. There's no room for sympathy for such people. Each time, I responded to Steve with a businesslike tone. I'm afraid I cannot be of assistance. Please refrain from further contact. Depending on the situation, appropriate measures will be taken. After that, there were no more calls from Steve. Having divorced Steve, I've decided to live alone, swearing no marriage. The new house I kept under contract is now rented out. The land is likely to appreciate in value, so there's more to gain than lose. Work is going well, and the company's performance is on the rise. More than ever, I'm dedicated to my work, which has become my passion. However, I haven't been able to quit bowling, a hobby Steve introduced me to. I still compete in bowling tournaments and have joined a bowling community circle. Most members are older than me, offering a wealth of life experience from which I'm learning. Recently, a man close to my age joined the group. Unlike Steve, he's gentle, modest, and reserved. Yet, when he scores a strike and smiles with joy, I find myself secretly thrilled. For now, I keep telling myself that work is my purpose in life. Someday, happiness will find its way to me, too. With this hope, I continue to dedicate myself to my work each day. So, there's no money left in this house, right? There's no need to deal with them anymore, is there? That's true. We don't need parents anymore. What? It means cutting ties with you. There's no point in pleasing a penniless mother-in-law, as there's nothing to gain from it. It's a hassle if they start asking us for money because they don't have any. Or if they expect us to take care of them without a penny to our names. We want to cut ties now. I understand your thoughts well. So, your inheritance will be those $30,000. And that's the severance for cutting parent-child ties, right?
Yeah.
That's fine. After her husband passed away, the true nature of the eldest son and his wife was revealed. In a way to vent their frustration over their failed plans, they presented me with a declaration of estrangement. $30,000 is a significant amount. But they will regret having received that money. 2 years after my husband passed away, I was sitting on a park bench eating bread. A peaceful moment was suddenly disrupted by a familiar voice. Huh? Isn't that you, Mother? Huh? True. Look. She's looking so tired, feeding pigeons in the park. No, I'm not feeding the pigeons, though. That's true. We took all the money, so naturally, you'd become homeless, wouldn't you? How's the homeless life going? My anger had long passed, and I was left so dumbfounded I couldn't say anything. I just sighed softly and resumed my lunch. Mom, why are you ignoring us? We've cut ties, so it's wrong to call you Mom now, huh? How about we call you Homeless Grandma? That's good. Homeless Grandma. The eldest son and his wife took my silence as an opportunity to say whatever they wanted. Since I finished my bread, it was time to tell them the truth. You keep mentioning homeless, but who are you talking about? You, Homeless Grandma? I'm not homeless. I live over there now. Huh? I pointed to a building and explained the truth to the eldest son and his wife. What? Shocked by the truth, the eldest son and his wife realized it was too late for regrets. I am Amy, a 60-year-old housewife. My husband, Tony, is 67 years old and is still working. He quit his job at a company about 20 years ago and founded an IT company. The company has been growing smoothly, especially since it began focusing on a certain area about 10 years ago, leading to rapid growth. As a result, the company has become quite large. As a housewife, I find it all very confusing, but my husband talks about data science and big data. Given his age, my husband has already retired as president but continues to work as the chairman. However, he seems to think it's about time to step down from that role as well. We have one son, Sean. When my husband retired as president, our eldest son did not take over the company. Moreover, he hasn't helped with my husband's company at all. I don't want to be seen as living off my father's success, so I'll make it on my own. After graduating from university, Sean said this and took a job at a company that had nothing to do with IT, leaving home. I was a bit disappointed because I had hoped our eldest son would take over his father's company. However, as a doting parent, I felt a bit proud of Sean for choosing not to rely on the power of his parents. And my face brightened when I heard about his decision. I won't force you, so you should do what you like. My husband seemed to share my sentiment, offering words of encouragement to Sean despite looking a bit disappointed. All was well until Sean got a job and then rarely contacted us. only coming home around Christmas. Lately, he would just call during Christmas and not come home at all. Well, it's not unusual for men, and as long as he is doing well, that's fine. I tell myself this, but I still wish he would contact us a bit more. Then, one day, far from Christmas, Sean called. It's unusual for you to contact us outside of the end of the year. I have something to report. I'll be coming home soon. What's the report? I'm getting married, so I'm coming to introduce her. Really? I was already happy just to hear from Sean. But I was surprised to hear about his marriage and couldn't help but raise my voice. Startled by my sudden loudness, my husband, who was leisurely watching TV, jerked and turned towards me. I returned his gaze with a beaming smile. Unbeknownst to my husband about Sean's marriage, a question mark floated above his head. Sean would bring his fiancée home in a month. Sean will be bringing his bride home soon. It's still 3 weeks away, isn't it? 3 weeks will fly by in no time. Since Sean called, I've been telling my husband almost daily that Sean will be coming home soon to report his marriage. My husband may look fed up, but I keep insisting that Sean's visit is imminent. I can't help but look forward to it. However, this marriage announcement would soon bring me anxiety. A month later, Sean and his fiancée arrived at our home. I'm home. We're here. Welcome. Come in. Your father is waiting in the living room. Excuse us. Megan, the fiancée, looked young, more like a cute idol than a beautiful model type. She looked around nervously at the entrance, which was also endearing. As I led her to the living room where my husband was waiting, she kept looking around curiously. Welcome. Come, have a seat. As they entered the living room, my husband seated Sean and his fiancée across from him. I sat next to my husband. The fiancée continued to look around nervously. Feeling embarrassed by her scrutinizing gaze, I spoke up. Is there something you're curious about? Oh, no. It's so different from what I imagined. Excuse me? I heard that Sean's father runs a big company. Hey, don't say embarrassing things like that all of a sudden. The words of the fiancé and Sean's rushed attempt to cover up made my husband and me exchange glances and laugh. Was the house more ordinary than you expected? No, not like that. Don't worry about it. We don't crave material things. So, even though my husband runs a big company, our house is just average in size. And we don't deck ourselves out in brand name goods or eat luxurious meals every day. I see. I'm sorry for saying something so strange all of a sudden. That's why I told you there's no need to be nervous. You see now that Dad isn't a person of intimidating presence, right? It seems that Sean couldn't help but laugh as well. The fiancé's tension seemed to dissolve after seeing Sean laugh. And the conversation flowed smoothly from there. The fiancée may look young, but she is 27 years old and is quite mature once you talk to her. I've been worried about Sean not getting married even after turning 30. But I'm relieved he's found someone good. 3 months later, Sean got married. While I was already happy enough with this, Sean's marriage brought an unexpected bonus. Hello, Mom. Everything good over there? Yes, everything's fine. You and Dad are getting older, so please take care of yourselves. Every time you call, that's all you talk about. Since getting married, Sean started calling once a month. Probably, his wife found out he hadn't been calling at all before. And must have suggested he keep in touch regularly. Not used to calling us, Sean seems unsure of what to talk about and always asks about our health. While I wish he would talk more about his work or his married life, I always listen to him with a smile. For the first Christmas after getting married, Sean and his wife visited us. I prepared homemade Christmas dishes with great effort, knowing Sean and his wife were coming. However, Sean's wife seemed a bit dissatisfied. "Megan, is there something you can't eat?" "No, it's not like that. I'll eat it, thank you." Sean's wife smiled back at me. But I didn't miss the brief moment her expression clouded over when she saw the Christmas dishes. And she hardly touched them. Perhaps there was something she couldn't eat? I worried that I had made Sean's wife feel uncomfortable and kept glancing at her, becoming too preoccupied with her reaction to join in the conversation. As my husband and Sean's family seemed to enjoy themselves. As the time came for Sean and his wife to leave, and my husband and Megan were talking at the entrance, Sean quietly said to me, so they couldn't hear, "Mom, homemade Christmas dishes aren't a thing anymore." That's not true, is it? There's nothing new or old about homemade Christmas dishes, right? That's an outdated way of thinking. What you made is the old-fashioned type of Christmas dish that prioritizes preservation, right? Nowadays, Christmas dishes are about using luxurious ingredients since they're meant to be eaten quickly. Megan was probably disappointed, wasn't she? Is that so? I guess I wasn't keeping up with what young people these days like. I'm sorry. There may be a trend, but I don't think making Christmas dishes warrants an apology. However, worrying too much about making a good impression on Sean's wife, I ended up apologizing to Sean in a whisper. After the small Christmas dish incident, the once-a-month calls became less frequent, eventually happening every 2 or 3 months. I was downhearted, thinking I had upset Sean's wife with the Christmas dishes. Seeing me like this, my husband kindly reassured me she wouldn't get upset over Christmas dishes. Maybe they're just busy with work. Or, trying to keep up with calling every month was too hard. It was a big change from not calling at all to monthly calls, right? Even if it's once every 3 months, it's good that he's still keeping in touch. My husband's words cheered me up a bit. However, a negative feeling lingered in the back of my mind. It seemed this negative feeling had the power to attract bad things. 6 months later, my husband fell ill. I guess I really can't work anymore. This is a good chance to retire. Lying in the hospital bed, my husband seemed relieved he didn't have to work anymore. But, having been married for over 30 years, I could tell. Tony must be frustrated that he had to retire unexpectedly due to his illness, not on his terms. The care in his laughter, trying not to worry me, pierces my heart. Naturally, I've informed our eldest son about his father's condition. "What? Dad's ill? I'll come to see him soon." Sean's response over the phone was indifferent when I told him. Tony's condition worsened progressively, yet Sean and Megan never visited him once. Gradually, once every 3 months calls ceased, and after Tony fell ill, Sean and Megan stopped coming home for Christmas as well. Time passed, and 3 years later, Tony passed away. I see. So, Dad's finally gone. Well, he was over 70, and he had a successful company. So he must have been satisfied with his life, right? Sean's reaction over the phone, when I informed him of Tony's death, was as indifferent as before. They showed up at the funeral but didn't help out, they left as soon as the formalities were over. Remembering them laughing as they got into their car, my sadness at losing Tony was replaced by anger. But that anger is fleeting, and soon I'm overwhelmed by sadness again. There's so much to do with paperwork and clearing things up, but I can't seem to make progress. About a month after Tony passed away, I finally started to feel better. It seems time does heal most wounds. However, just as my spirits were improving, a problem arose that seemed to drain my newfound energy. One morning, while doing laundry, the doorbell rang. "Mom, open up." Checking the monitor, I saw Sean and Megan standing there. Despite it not being Christmas, I was puzzled by their sudden visit but went to the door. "Dad's workroom is this way." Wait a moment. Upon opening the door, Sean and Megan rushed into the house without a greeting and headed straight for Tony's workroom. I was left standing at the door, bewildered, and hastily followed them. Where is it? It should be in one of these drawers, I think. The door to Tony's workroom was left open, and I could hear Sean and Megan rummaging through drawers and talking. What are you two doing? They stopped and turned to me, pausing their search. I had an idea of what they were looking for, but I hoped I was wrong. It's about time we discussed inheritance, right? We came to collect what we're due. He was the president and chairman of a big company and hardly spent any money. So there must be plenty left. My hopes were dashed. Sean and Megan threw a few words at me and resumed their search, acting like thieves. I felt so disheartened that I didn't even try to stop them. Found it. Is this it? Oh. Is it? What's inside? As they eagerly flipped through Tony's bankbook, their expressions suddenly darkened. What's this? There's hardly any money in here. Damn. So there wasn't as much money as we thought. It was clear they had come looking for Tony's money. However, I couldn't grasp the meaning of their conversation. And my thoughts froze, leaving me standing there, looking foolish. Mom, you've had an easy life till now. But it looks like you're facing tough times at the end. I snapped back to reality at Sean's voice. As my mind cleared, I saw Sean and Megan looking at me with malicious grins. Still unable to comprehend the situation, I braced myself to be ridiculed and asked Sean. What do you mean by a tough times? No need to play dumb. We know. Your husband's company was absorbed by another company around the time he fell ill, right? So, the company went under another company's umbrella because it was running at a loss, right? What? What are you two talking about? A person who was about to go bankrupt with their company couldn't possibly have any money. But since he was the head of a big company, even if it was struggling, I thought there would still be some money left over. My plan is ruined now.
Yeah.
What a disappointment. Wait a minute. What do you mean by that? Hearing Sean and Megan's conversation, I couldn't understand a thing and, out of frustration, raised my voice. However, Sean and Megan weren't fazed by my shouting and continued to wear their villainous smiles. The reason I didn't join Dad's company was because it seemed too difficult to work at such a complicated business. Why work hard and sweat it out at Dad's company when I could easily inherit his vast fortune someday? It made more sense to do an easy job in moderation. But now, to see my plan not come to fruition, I even made an effort to be nice and had Sean keep in touch, thinking it was better to stay on your good side at first. I even endured that awful homemade Christmas dish. You only stopped because it became clear Dad wasn't a strict person. So in the end, you figured it wasn't necessary anymore. And you, when you found out Dad had let go of the company, you just accepted it as a downgrade from a guaranteed life of luxury to an ordinary one. I may have given up, but I was still hoping for something like $100,000 in savings. Look at this bank book. Only $30,000 in it. I wonder if it costs money to shut down a company. Well, we'll just have to graciously accept this $30,000. Listening to Sean and Megan babble on recklessly, my anger was on the verge of exploding. But I swallowed the words that came to my throat, biting my back teeth hard, pushing the anger down. What's wrong, Amy? Your face is all red. So, this means there's no money left in this house, right? There's no need to deal with you anymore, is there? That's true. No need for a parent who ruined my plans. We're done. What? We're saying we're cutting ties with you. Since there's no money left in this house, there's no point in pleasing a penniless mother-in-law. It's a hassle if you start asking us for money because you don't have any, or expect us to take care of you without a penny to our names. We want to cut ties now. I understand your thoughts well. So, your inheritance will be those $30,000. And that's the severance for cutting parent-child ties, right? I can keep everything else, right?
Yeah.
That's fine. We don't need this house anyway. And we'd be in trouble if you try to saddle us with any debt. We're satisfied with just the $30,000. Sean and Megan, like at the funeral, left laughing. I didn't want to give even $30,000 to Sean and Megan if I could help it. $30,000 is a significant amount. But later on, Sean and Megan will regret having received that money. 2 years after Tony passed away, I was wandering around the town for errands. Moving around with a body over 60 has its challenges. Tired, I decided to sit on a park bench to rest. I took out a sandwich I bought from the supermarket earlier to have a simple lunch as I sat down on the bench. As I was eating, pigeons began to gather around. Watching the pigeons, I felt a sense of peace. Indeed, they are symbols of peace. However, this peaceful atmosphere was quickly shattered by a familiar voice. Huh? Isn't that you, Mother? Huh? True. Look. She's looking so tired, feeding pigeons in the park. No, I'm not feeding the pigeons, though. That's true. As always, you're not spending money on appearances, huh? Oh, maybe you don't have any money left to spend. We took all the money, so naturally, you'd become homeless, wouldn't you? How's the homeless life going? As usual, Sean and Megan don't listen to anything I say. My anger has long passed, and I'm now so exasperated I can't even find the words. I sigh softly and resume my lunch. Mom, why are you ignoring us? Oh, because we've cut ties. Calling you Mom would be wrong now, huh? How about homeless grandma? That's good. Homeless grandma. Sean and Megan continue to say whatever they want, laughing as I remain silent. After finishing my bread, it's time to tell them the truth. You keep talking about homeless, but whom are you referring to? You, homeless grandma. I am not homeless. I live over there now. Huh? I point to a building. Sean and Megan slowly turn their gaze in the direction I am pointing to. The building I am pointing to looks small and far away, but it's a prestigious high-rise apartment. I thought living in a luxury high-rise apartment was too much at first. But it's quite convenient. There's a barrier-free apartment there suitable for the elderly, and that's where I live. Plus, there's a care staff on standby 24/7, so I feel safe. Huh? Don't try to show off. There's no way a homeless grandma could afford to live there, right? Well, yes. That high-rise apartment was left to me by my husband. What do you mean? My husband owned 5 buildings of high-rise apartments. I live in one of them now. I own the other mansions, so I receive rental income from them. That's why I'm not struggling for living expenses. If you're going to lie, at least make it a believable one. It's true. I'll show you some evidence. But only a little since it's not something usually shown. I take out documents related to the ownership and rental agreements of the high-rise apartment from my bag and show them to Sean and Megan, who are so shocked they look like their jaws might drop. I had these documents with me because my errand today was related to the high-rise apartment. They seemed skeptical of me, but after seeing these documents, they finally understood I was telling the truth. Where did Dad get all that money? You two seem to think Dad's company was absorbed because it was in the red. But it was a proper sale. The high-rise apartments were bought as an investment with the money from that sale. That's why there was only $30,000 in savings. I think Dad also wanted to leave something behind other than money. But since he had to retire suddenly due to his illness, he probably wanted to do something like work, don't you think? Realizing they only received $30,000 while there were high-rise apartments, Sean and Megan were in a state of shock. However, owning 5 entire buildings might seem exaggerated. And as Sean said, it might come off as a lie. Constructing a single high-rise apartment costs several tens of millions. And 5 would require several hundreds of millions. It's not feasible to acquire such an amount from selling a company. Nor is it easy for even large corporations to build 5 high-rise apartments. Therefore, I'm not an owner of an entire building but rather a fractional owner. When I said 5 buildings, it meant I owned units in 5 different buildings, totaling 6 apartments. It was easier to just say 5 buildings. Sean and Megan misunderstood, thinking I owned entire buildings. But I'll leave it as is since correcting them seems tedious. Even owning 6 units is significant. Each unit in the high-rise apartments my husband bought costs over $500,000. Totaling over $3 million for 6. My husband invested almost all the money from selling his company into these high-rise apartments. It must have been thrilling for him to make such a significant purchase with the money he earned throughout his life. If you have that many, couldn't you share one with us? Right. It'd be too much for you to manage alone. We can help. Upon learning I am the owner of the high-rise apartment, Sean and Megan became cautious with their words, their speech awkward and forced. It was a complete turnaround. Of course, these are not people I can trust. There's no need for estranged strangers to worry about me. But wait a minute. Even if we've cut ties, we're still family. That means, when you're gone, the high-rise apartment automatically becomes mine, right? Oh, right. We don't need to bow down to this old lady here. Sean and Megan started to smirk again, like villains. But I have no intention of letting such malicious people inherit my husband's precious legacy. Unfortunately for you, I won't be leaving it to you. Are you planning to write in the will that you don't want me to inherit anything? That's futile. I know the law. A child's right to inherit can't be easily annulled. Yes, that's why I plan to dispose of the assets in the end. What? I intend to transfer the high-rise apartment to acquaintances of your father. What? One of the 6 high-rise apartment units is where I live. But the other 5 are occupied by my husband's acquaintances. All of them are married and run their businesses. So I don't think they'll move out until I join my husband. Thus, I'm not worried about vacancies. These people, who have supported me and whom my husband was grateful to in his lifetime, will be the ones I transfer the high-rise apartments to when I pass away. It's far better than leaving anything to Sean and Megan. Also, the little money that has started to accumulate from the rental income of the high-rise apartment, I plan to donate to my husband's cherished company. It might not be a large amount, but since I've already given Sean and Megan $30,000, I don't want to give them even a penny more. Well, when it's time for me to depart, I'll make sure to leave absolutely nothing behind. You can't. Sean, realizing I had no intention of leaving anything behind, seemed to lose all strength and sat down on the ground. $30,000 is a significant sum, but it's not an amount Sean can't earn. Naturally, he would regret throwing away the high-rise apartment for just $30,000. It's not pleasant to discuss what will happen after I'm gone while I'm still alive. However, seeing Sean and Megan's panicked expressions this time brought me some enjoyment. Well, I have other things to take care of, so I'll be going now. Goodbye, estranged strangers. I left the park with a light step after finishing my rest. Sean, seemingly bitter about missing out on the high-rise apartment, impulsively bought a small apartment building. However, due to insufficient knowledge and rushed decisions, he struggled to fill the vacancies, and the apartment management continued to be in the red. After investing his savings and taking on loans for the purchase, he can't keep going like this forever and will eventually have to let go of the property. That would leave him with several hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. If he attempts to sell the building and can't find a buyer, the situation could become even more dire. If there's no buyer, he might have to demolish the building and sell just the land, which is a frightening thought when considering the additional costs of demolition on top of the debt. I live comfortably in a high-rise apartment designed for the elderly. The people living in my high-rise apartment, grateful for my husband's help, take good care of me. Living alone in old age is said to be lonely, but I don't feel that way at all. The weather looks nice today, so maybe I'll go for a walk in the park again. In the completely dark mountains, I was pulled by the arm and roughly dropped out of the car. I don't need a gold digger like you coming back. Sleeping outdoors sounds fun. From inside the car, my husband and mother-in-law just opened the window and, laughing together, said that. Then, the car quickly drove away. If only I could fly away into the sky. Today, as always, I was looking outside through the window. I am 30 years old. I am married to Ken, who is 32. And we live together with my mother-in-law, Martha. My parents, actually, died in an accident, leaving me with no relatives. I worked as an office lady and married, but after moving in together, I suddenly developed asthma. The condition was severe, and I became disabled and couldn't work anymore. I said I liked quiet women, but I never said I liked women with quiet health conditions. My husband came home and said this in an irritated tone. His attitude was harsher than usual. That's when I understood. Today is, the 25th. Payday. Normally, with both of us working, we should be able to live a richer life than most. How did it come to this? Thinking about how much of our salary goes to utilities, how much is taken by taxes. My husband was particularly moody on payday. A continuous clicking of his tongue. But what can I do? And while grumbling his dissatisfaction, he lit a cigarette, took a deep drag, and then exhaled the accumulated smoke. Cough. Cough. I choked on the smoke from the Marlboro cigarette. Even the smoke lingering in the room was too much for me. I felt like a piece of smoked ham. Then, Martha also lit her own Winston cigarette, which had been lying on the table. She too inhaled deeply, then exhaled the smoke just like before. Why does she have to imitate even this? I coughed again. Since my husband and mother-in-law smoke different brands, it felt like I was being smoked with a mix of cherry and applewood chips. I can relate to you now, Ham. Watching me cough, both of them looked even more annoyed. This had become a monthly payday ritual. Really. I wish you'd earn at least enough to cover our cigarette expenses. So dramatic. You're coughing from asthma anyway, aren't you? That constant coughing and wheezing is so annoying. A good-for-nothing fox. My mother-in-law took another drag and exhaled a cloud of white smoke. The monthly payday event. A mother and son's joint bride bullying festival. Being criticized for my inability to work and my illness while engulfed in smoke was nothing but torture for me. But when you think about it, we should have questioned this from the start. Is asthma really so debilitating that you can't work? It's just a cough, right? One evening, my mother-in-law started this conversation. Apparently out of cigarettes, she pulled out her wallet to buy more, only to realize she didn't have enough money for them. Her irritation at this discovery triggered the rant. Asthma and a mere cough are completely different. But my mother-in-law continued. Even when you were hospitalized last year, I thought it was just the doctor wanting to make money, fooling you. I mean, hospitalized just for a cough? When I asked around, everyone said it sounded ridiculous. Indeed, it was true that I couldn't work anymore, and the income one might have earned was lost. I'm not one to talk back against such harsh words. So I could only listen to my mother-in-law's unreasonable tirade. But then Ken added fuel to the fire. That's really true. Ken agreed. Just for a cough, you get a mountain of medicines. And it's not just once, it keeps going on. Why should we get involved in your time killing and the doctor's money making? He too fumbled in his chest pocket, seemingly wanting a cigarette. Though Ken still had a few cigarettes. He seemed to get irritated discussing this while being a few short. He kept clicking his tongue. Exactly. My mother-in-law, as if struck by a sudden idea, reached for my bag. She roughly grabbed my everyday shoulder bag and unzipped it. Then, holding it with both hands, she turned it upside down towards the ceiling and opened the mouth of the bag wide, shaking it out. Everything inside my bag tumbled out, scattering in various directions on the floor. From the scattered pile, Martha reached straight for my wallet. What? I felt exposed, as if my privacy had been violated, and was shocked by her brazen touch on my wallet. Is she going to take the money for cigarettes? But Martha's next action surpassed all my expectations. It's crazy to go to the hospital just for a cough. We need to correct this wasteful behavior of the fallen bride. Martha shouted, and from my wallet, she pulled out, not cash or coins, but my Medicare card. I was utterly shocked, as the item she extracted was far beyond what I had imagined. The unexpected sight of my Medicare card left me speechless. Ignoring my stunned and frozen state, Martha proceeded with her next action. Holding my insurance card, she headed straight to the drawer where my medications were stored, opened it, and grabbed a month's worth of my medication. Returning to the living room, she began yelling at me. Just for a cough, you're buying all these medicines. This is excessive luxury. It's because of these ineffective medicines that you're not getting better. For a cough, you just need throat lozenges, plenty of which are available at any supermarket. After her tirade, she threw my medications and the Medicare card into the trash can with the organic waste. My lifeline. I turned pale. Well, they say the beginning is the hardest part of quitting smoking. You can do it. It's quitting medicines in your case, though. My husband grinned slyly. They say quitting smoking starts with candy. Everything begins with candy, after all. I was now receiving guidance from these two people who never could quit smoking, for some reason. Mother's tough love is different, indeed. Oh, and while you're at it, hand over some money for cigarettes from that wallet. All right, I'll take some too. $20 was taken from my wallet, which was then carelessly tossed back onto the floor among the scattered contents of my bag. As I sat down to put everything back into my bag, I watched my mother-in-law and husband praise each other for discarding my medication and taking cigarette money from my wallet. The thought of possibly having an asthma attack tomorrow without my medicine left me feeling breathless with anxiety, and thought, I want to fly away. I want to escape from this place. But it seems that just throwing away my medication and banning me from hospital visits wasn't enough for Martha and Ken. Just because we're married doesn't mean I have to support someone who can't work, said Ken. If you couldn't work and had your own family, you'd have been divorced quickly. Like in the old drama. When a factory girl couldn't work anymore, she was sent back to her hometown, added Martha. The only reason you're here is that you have nowhere else to go to shelter from the rain and wind, they began. That's not true. I'm not just sitting here doing nothing. I take care of all the household chores. I felt compelled to speak up, even though I'm usually timid. Indeed, I was the one who prepared lunch and dinner boxes for Ken. And I did all the cleaning and laundry. Martha never helped with household chores. But their response was dismissive. What are you saying? Household chores aren't real work. If you were earning a wage, we could hire a maid with change to spare. A wife who just loafs around the house without even having kids, they said. And the parent-child meeting continued, eventually concluding that I should be grateful just for being given shelter. How can we make her understand her place? Maybe we should just leave her in the mountains. Or on an island. Or maybe bury her underground. This conversation about abandoning me became more serious. And I broke out in a cold sweat. It was no longer a joke. My worst fears were confirmed. My husband and mother-in-law were actually planning to abandon me. Maybe it's time for you to understand your place, to experience it firsthand. They say experience is the best teacher, after all. That's a good idea. They talked about leaving me in the mountains as if it were a school field trip, to make me appreciate being allowed to stay at home. I couldn't let that happen. I desperately resisted. Wait, I really can't survive if you leave me. I have asthma. I really do appreciate being allowed to stay at home. That's why I do so much housework. But my pleas were ignored. If you were really grateful, you wouldn't be coughing and making noise all the time. They said. Seeing the night view will make you appreciate the happiness of home more. And think about how you'll treat me in my old age, overnight, they said heartlessly. And so, I was forcibly pushed into the car by Ken. Of course, at this point, my smartphone was taken away. After a 3-hour drive, in the darkness, I was pulled out of the car and abandoned in an unknown mountain area. Ken slammed the car door as he got back into the driver's seat. I ran and clung to the car, but Ken just honked the horn as if to say, "Don't come near. We don't need a leech like you coming back. Sleeping outdoors sounds fun." From inside the car, my husband and mother-in-law only opened the window to say these words. "Wait, really, just wait." I cried out, almost in tears, but my voice was ignored. With a loud vroom, the window was closed, and then the car quickly drove away. I watched the last light of the car's tail lights until they disappeared, filled with a sense of helplessness. Only when the lights were no longer visible did I look around. There was no night view to see. There was not a single light. I want to fly away. I looked up at the sky. In the pitch darkness, the stars seemed exceptionally beautiful. Without any lights, the sky seemed so close and clear. I opened the zipper of the backpack that had been thrown out with me. As I took out its contents, I took a deep breath. Having my smartphone taken away and being abandoned in the mountains. Did they really think I would kneel down, shed tears, and say, "Thank you for just letting me stay in your house, I'll eat grass to survive. Please forgive me, dear husband and mother-in-law. I'll burn down such a blueprint they had in mind. I'll fly away." Several days later, I was facing my husband and mother-in-law. But not at home. I was in a guest house. A bright room in the guest house. The new, clean floors reflected the sunlight, making the room look even brighter. Such a stark contrast to that dark night. I saw it on TV. Despite the reflected light, he had a terribly pale face, beyond blue to almost black. And he started speaking in a trembling voice, looking down. Opposite to him, I was in a cheerful mood. Just like the weather today. Yes. It was good news, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was. I'll show it to you again. The landlady of the guest house had kindly recorded it, and I deliberately played it on the TV. The morning news. Rescued by a drone calling for help. It was featured as a piece of bright news. In the video, I was being interviewed. Your drone piloting skills were amazing. Yes, I've been into aerial photography as a hobby for a long time. So flying at night wasn't a problem. The reporter asked more questions. When did you come up with the idea to attach a letter to the drone? I responded with a smile. I had been planning it since my husband and mother-in-law started talking about wanting to abandon me in the mountains. While showing them the interview, I looked down at the two of them, cowering. How does it feel to have your actions exposed to the whole country? Ken and Martha were trembling, their lips quivering. When did you learn to operate a drone? He asked in a feeble voice. I chuckled. Since you started calling me a waste of space. That's when I started thinking about flying away. My desire to fly away grew stronger after my health deteriorated. And I was subjected to their verbal abuse. I would often look up at the sky, sighing. But one day, while I was doing chores, I happened to see a TV program about drones. It gave me hope. I secretly learned how to operate a drone using the money I had saved when I was single. I didn't tell my husband and mother-in-law because I feared they would criticize it as another expensive hobby. You two, who even took away my Medicare card, wouldn't think I'd share my interest in drones with you. I could easily imagine you taking it away and destroying it. When I thought they might abandon me, I sneaked a foldable drone into my backpack. I attached a letter requesting rescue and sent it flying. The person who found it was the landlady of this guest house. Thus, I was rescued, and the TV picked up my story. The drone rescue request became a topic of interest. People saw me on the news and learned about what my husband and mother-in-law had been doing to me. They turned pale and came here to face me. Well, it's good that you came here willingly, I said nonchalantly. Finally finding some semblance of control and empowerment in this difficult situation. Indeed, behind Ken and mother-in-law Martha, two shadows had been looming the whole time. That was why they were so pale. I never thought it would become such a big deal. Ken exclaimed. It's just a cough, after all. Martha cried. I thought sleeping outdoors would be enjoyable to some extent. I couldn't help but laugh at their completely inadequate excuses. Without consent? Dragging me into a car? And then dragging me out of it by force? Ken stammered, that was. As he struggled to speak, I gave a nod to the police officers. The officers approached them. Their already shrunken figures seemed to shrink even more under the pressure. Would you please accompany us to the station? What? They both started gasping like fish out of water when told this. Surprised? Can't breathe? I laughed, watching them. I couldn't breathe properly for a long time because of my asthma. With the police present, it was clear they understood the gravity of their actions. What you did isn't just a prank. It's serious misconduct. And by the way, throwing away my medication is also destruction of property. But I wasn't finished yet. And one last thing, about all the things you've been saying to me. I caressed my drone. You probably know by now, since the news and various media outlets have covered it. Thanks to them, my name is out there, and I've gotten sponsors. Of course, all the aerial photography I did, fueled by my desire to fly away and seek salvation from above, has been recognized. From now on, I'll live as an aerial drone photographer. What? They were even more shocked, but they couldn't fall back. Two police officers stood behind them. Ken, almost breathless, asked, Does that mean you're making money now? I answered his question. Yes, at least 3 times your monthly salary. That's when Martha tried to appeal to me. I'm sorry, Anne. Let's live together peacefully from now on. That's the first time you've called me by my name. Until now, it was always "Hey, you." I smiled for the first time today. I'm really sorry. I'll call you by your name from now on. I firmly rejected her offer. I refuse to live with you. Cigarette smoke is bad for asthma. Ken, in a panic, took out his pack of cigarettes, crushed it, and placed the crumpled pack on the table between us as a sign of his commitment. I won't smoke anymore, so, please, no arrest, and let's live together and support each other. You're joking, right? I took the pack of cigarettes and put it back in his chest pocket. Why don't you both continue to blow smoke in each other's faces? Watching the crushed and unsmokable cigarettes in his hand, Ken let out a distorted groan. And so, he and Martha were taken away by the police. I sought a substantial amount in damages for their harassment and successfully divorced Ken. Thanks to the news coverage, I became a drone photographer, using drones for aerial photography. Drones can be used for photography anywhere. So I continued to live in this countryside, which I became acquainted with after descending from the mountain. Having cut ties with my cigarette-smoking husband and mother-in-law, my asthma improved a bit. Of course, my medication was no longer being thrown away, and my treatment proceeded smoothly. Connections made through aerial photography led to new opportunities. And now I also participate in test flights for drone development projects. I was able to fly in the sky. I will continue to fly in the sky. I gripped the control sticks of my drone's remote, ready to soar once again.